You've got potential, Ethan, real potential, but you've got to show me some loyalty tonight. My name is Ethan. I'm 33 and work as a project manager at Ironspire Motors in San Antonio. Been there 4 years, worked my way up from junior analyst to running million-dollar accounts. The kind of guy who shows up early, stays late, and keeps his mouth shut when things get political. That evening at Lake Tahoe, something shifted in a way I didn't see coming. Vanessa Pike had been my supervisor for 18 months. Smart woman, aggressive in meetings, the type who could tear apart a budget proposal in minutes and rebuild it better. She'd hired me into the project management role after my previous boss retired. Always professional, always focused. Until that retreat. We were celebrating the biggest quarter in company history. Ironspire had landed 3 major contracts with automotive manufacturers, and my team had delivered every milestone ahead of schedule. The retreat was supposed to be a reward. Team building, strategy sessions, and a bonfire on the final night where everyone could unwind. I was standing near the fire, nursing a beer and talking with Jackson from accounting, when Vanessa appeared beside me. She'd been drinking. I could smell the wine on her breath and see the loose way she was holding her glass. "Ethan, walk with me," she said, nodding toward the dock. I figured she wanted to discuss the promotion rumors that had been floating around. Senior management had been asking about my availability for larger projects. Made sense she'd want to talk strategy before we headed back to the office. We walked to the end of the dock, away from the group. The lake was calm, reflecting the bonfire behind us. She turned to face me, closer than she normally stood during our weekly check-ins. "You've been doing excellent work," she said. "Really excellent. I've been watching how you handle pressure, how you manage client relationships. You're ready for the next level." I thanked her, told her I appreciated the feedback, and was eager to take on more responsibility. That's when her tone changed. "I could fast-track you to senior management," she said, stepping closer. "Skip the usual bureaucracy, but you've got to show me some loyalty tonight." Her hand touched my arm. Not a professional gesture, something else entirely. I laughed it off, made some joke about being too tired for serious career planning after a long day, and started walking back toward the group. She followed, but didn't say anything else. I thought it was just the wine talking. Figured things would be normal again Monday morning. I was wrong. I'd grown up in a family that believed in keeping your head down and doing good work. My dad spent 30 years as a machinist, never missed a day, retired with a pension and the respect of everyone in the shop. My mom taught elementary school for 25 years. They raised me to believe that hard work and integrity would carry you through any situation. Ironspire Motors had been my first real shot at corporate success. I'd started in the research division, analyzing market trends and competitor strategies. The work was solid, but I wanted something with more client interaction. When the project management position opened up, I'd thrown everything into the application process. Vanessa had been the hiring manager. She'd impressed me during the interview. Direct questions. No nonsense about company culture or team-building exercises. She wanted to know if I could handle difficult clients, manage competing deadlines, and deliver results under pressure. I could. She hired me within a week. The first year had been demanding but fair. Vanessa set clear expectations, provided the resources I needed, and backed me up when clients got unreasonable. She'd promoted me twice, increased my project load, and started including me in strategic planning sessions with senior leadership. I respected her, trusted her judgment. When other managers complained about micromanagement or unrealistic deadlines, I defended her. She was tough, but she was building something important in our division. The retreat had been her idea. She'd argued to the executive team that our division deserved recognition for the quarterly results. We'd brought in $47 million in new contracts, delivered every project on time, and maintained client satisfaction scores above 90%. She'd fought for the budget, planned the itinerary, and personally approved every detail, including the security system at the retreat center. Monday morning felt different the moment I walked into the office. Vanessa's assistant handed me a stack of project files without making eye contact. My usual 9 a.m. check-in with Vanessa had been moved to 2 p.m. without explanation. When I tried to access the client database, My permissions had been restricted. I figured it was a technical issue. IT problems weren't uncommon after company trips. People forgot passwords, systems got updated, access levels got shuffled around. I submitted a help desk ticket and waited. The 2 p.m. meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. Vanessa handed me 3 new project assignments, each with deadlines that seemed impossible given the scope of work involved. When I asked about additional resources or timeline adjustments, she looked at me like I'd suggested something offensive. "These are the deadlines, Ethan, figure it out." The door closed behind me with more force than necessary. That evening, I stayed until 8 p.m. reviewing the project requirements, trying to understand how anyone could realistically complete that volume of work in the time allotted. It felt like a test. I assumed I was missing something. 3 weeks into what I now understood was systematic sabotage, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every project Vanessa assigned came with impossible deadlines. Client meetings I'd scheduled were mysteriously canceled. Reports I'd submitted were returned with demands for revisions that contradicted previous feedback. The breaking point came during a presentation to Meridian Automotive, one of our biggest clients. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing a proposal for their new electric vehicle line. The research was solid, the budget realistic, the timeline achievable. Vanessa had reviewed the presentation personally and approved every slide. 20 minutes before the meeting, she pulled me aside. "I'm taking over the presentation," she said. "You'll be there to answer technical questions if needed." I watched her deliver my work to the client, using my research, my budget analysis, my timeline projections. When Meridian approved the contract, worth $8 million over 2 years, Vanessa accepted their congratulations without mentioning my involvement. After the clients left, she turned to me with a smile that felt like a blade. "Good support work, Ethan. Maybe you'll be ready for lead presentations in a few more years." I sat in my truck in the parking lot for an hour after everyone else had gone home. Not angry, not yet. Just trying to understand what had changed and why. The retreat kept coming back to me, the doc. Her hand on my arm. The way she'd looked at me when I'd walked away. I'd rejected her. Now she was making me pay for it. That night, I started documenting everything. Email timestamps, project assignments, meeting notes, deadline changes. A pattern of retaliation that became clearer with each entry. I wasn't going to quit. Wasn't going to file a complaint or make accusations I couldn't prove. I'd learned from my dad that when someone tries to push you around, you don't push back harder, you get smarter. The documentation was the beginning. But I needed something more concrete, something that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. I started thinking about the retreat, about the security cameras I'd noticed around the bonfire area, about the audio recording capabilities that most companies installed in their surveillance systems. Vanessa had approved the retreat center personally. She'd overseen every security detail. She'd signed off on the recording equipment that might have captured our conversation on the dock. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who was trying to destroy my career might have unknowingly documented her own downfall. I made a phone call to an old friend who worked in corporate security. Asked some general questions about retreat center surveillance systems. Got the information I needed without revealing why I was asking. Then I sat down and wrote a very careful email to the retreat center's management company. I wasn't going to accuse anyone of anything. I was simply going to request access to security footage from a specific date and time for personal reasons related to a missing item. The truth would speak for itself. 4 weeks after the retreat, I decided to push back. Not aggressively, not emotionally. But I wasn't going to keep accepting impossible deadlines without at least trying to address the situation through proper channels. I scheduled a meeting with Human Resources. Patricia Caldwell had been with Ironspire for 12 years, and she'd always struck me as someone who dealt with problems directly. I brought my documentation, email chains showing timeline changes, project assignments that contradicted previous work allocations, meeting notes that demonstrated the pattern of retaliation. Patricia listened carefully, asked specific questions, and took notes throughout our conversation. She was professional but concerned. This wasn't the first time she'd heard complaints about management behavior, though she couldn't discuss specifics. I'll need to investigate this thoroughly, she said. Can you give me a week to review the documentation and speak with relevant parties? I agreed, left feeling like I'd done the right thing. Maybe this could be resolved quietly, professionally, without destroying anyone's career or creating office drama. The retaliation came faster than I'd expected. 2 days later, Vanessa called me into her office at 4:47 p.m. She had my human resources complaint printed out on her desk, along with what looked like a personnel file. "I'm disappointed, Ethan," she said. "I thought we had a professional relationship built on mutual respect." She explained that my recent performance had been declining, that my attitude toward authority had become problematic, that several clients had expressed concerns about my communication style during recent project meetings. None of it was true, but she had documentation. Client feedback forms I'd never seen, performance evaluations that contradicted previous reviews, a paper trail that painted me as an employee who'd become increasingly difficult to manage. "I'm recommending you for a performance improvement plan," she said. 90 days to demonstrate that you can meet company standards. Patricia from Human Resources will be monitoring your progress. The improvement plan was designed to fail. Impossible metrics, contradictory objectives, deadlines that required working 18-hour days 7 days a week. When I asked Patricia about the reasonableness of the requirements, she explained that performance improvement plans were management tools designed to help struggling employees succeed. She couldn't override Vanessa's assessment. She could only monitor compliance with the plan. I was trapped, refused to sign the improvement plan, and I'd be terminated for insubordination. Accept it, and I'd be working under conditions designed to force my resignation or provide grounds for dismissal. I signed the plan, started working the impossible hours, met every unrealistic deadline by sacrificing sleep, personal time, and my sanity. For 6 weeks, I delivered everything Vanessa demanded, exactly when she demanded it. She kept moving the goalposts. Projects that met specifications were rejected for subjective reasons. Client meetings I'd prepared for were reassigned at the last minute. Email communications were mischaracterized in performance reviews. The psychological pressure was deliberate and relentless. She wanted me to break, to explode in a meeting, to send an angry email, to give her cause for immediate termination. I didn't break, but I wasn't winning either. During week 7 of the improvement plan, I received an email from the retreat center's security department. They'd located the footage I'd requested and were willing to provide copies for a nominal processing fee. Standard procedure for personal property claims. I paid the fee. Received a digital file containing 43 minutes of audio and video from the bonfire area on the final night of the retreat. The quality was better than I'd hoped. Clear audio, multiple camera angles, timestamp verification that would hold up in any legal proceeding. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable. The conversation was unambiguous. The timeline of retaliation was documented in her own emails and personnel actions. I had everything I needed. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. First, I wanted to see how far she was willing to go. The performance improvement plan was scheduled to end on a Friday. Vanessa called me into her office that Thursday afternoon with Patricia from Human Resources present. I brought my documentation showing completion of every requirement in the plan. Client satisfaction scores above target, project deliverables submitted ahead of deadline, metrics that exceeded company standards. Vanessa reviewed my file with the expression of someone who'd already made her decision. "While you've technically met the minimum requirements," she said, "your overall attitude and team collaboration skills remain concerning. I'm extending the improvement plan for an additional 90 days. Patricia looked surprised. Extension of improvement plans required executive approval and documented justification. Vanessa handed her a folder containing what she claimed was additional evidence of performance issues. I asked to review the evidence. Vanessa declined, stating that personnel evaluations were confidential management tools. I couldn't see the documentation being used to extend my probationary period. After the meeting, Patricia pulled me aside. "This is unusual," she admitted quietly. "Extensions typically require significant documented incidents. I'll need to review this with senior leadership." That weekend, I decided to dig deeper into what had happened. I'd been focused on my own situation, but I started wondering if this was part of a larger pattern, if Vanessa had done this before. I reached out to Trevor, a former colleague who'd left Ironspire 6 months earlier. We'd worked together on several projects before he'd suddenly resigned without explanation. I'd always wondered why someone would leave such a good position without having something else lined up. Trevor agreed to meet for coffee. He was reluctant to discuss his departure initially, but when I explained what I was experiencing, his demeanor changed completely. "She did the same thing to me," he said. "Almost exactly the same thing." Trevor had attended the previous year's retreat. Different location, same setup. Vanessa had approached him during the final evening reception. Similar conversation, similar implications about career advancement in exchange for personal loyalty. When he'd declined her advances, the retaliation had started immediately. Impossible deadlines, credit reassignment, performance improvement plans designed to fail. He'd lasted 4 months before resigning rather than face termination. "I should have fought it," he said. "But I didn't have proof. She was careful, always had justification for everything she did." He'd found another position, but the experience had damaged his confidence and reputation in the industry. Vanessa had provided references that were technically positive, but included subtle warnings about his ability to handle pressure and work collaboratively. Trevor wasn't the only one. Over the following week, I made discreet inquiries and discovered 2 other former employees who'd left under similar circumstances. Both had attended company retreats. Both had experienced sudden changes in their working relationships with Vanessa afterward. The pattern was clear. Vanessa was using her position to proposition male subordinates, then retaliating professionally when they rejected her advances. She'd been doing this for at least 3 years, systematically driving away employees who wouldn't comply with her demands. Human Resources had never investigated because the complaints were individual and separated by time. Each case looked like isolated performance issues rather than coordinated harassment. But now I had something none of the previous victims had possessed: audio recording of the initial proposition and documented timeline of retaliation. I also had something else. The retreat center's security department had mentioned that their recording system maintained archived footage for 3 years for insurance purposes. Previous retreats might be documented as well. I wasn't just fighting for my own career anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd been forced out by this woman's abuse of power. The plan I'd been developing became more comprehensive, more strategic. Vanessa thought she was untouchable. She'd been getting away with this behavior for years without consequences. That was about to change. I spent the weekend developing a comprehensive strategy. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stopping a pattern of abuse that had destroyed multiple careers and would continue until someone forced accountability. My first call was to Trevor. I explained what I'd discovered about the retreat recordings and asked if he'd be willing to provide a statement about his own experience. He agreed immediately. "I've been carrying this for months," he said. "If there's a chance to stop her from doing this to someone else, I'm in." By Tuesday, I had statements from 3 former employees documenting similar patterns of harassment and retaliation. Each case followed the same timeline: retreat proposition, rejection, immediate work environment deterioration, forced resignation. The retreat center confirmed they had archived footage from previous years: 3 annual retreats, 3 documented instances of inappropriate behavior, all captured on security cameras that Vanessa herself had approved. I arranged to purchase copies of the relevant footage. The processing fee was significant, but worth every dollar for the documentation it provided. While waiting for the footage, I continued documenting my current situation. Every email, every deadline change, every performance metric manipulation. I was building a case that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. Wednesday morning, Vanessa called another meeting with Human Resources. She had new documentation showing additional performance concerns, client complaints that I'd never heard about, project delays that were attributed to my management failures. I sat quietly and listened to her presentation. Patricia took notes, clearly uncomfortable with the volume of negative feedback that had allegedly been accumulating. I think we need to consider termination, Vanessa concluded. This employee is clearly not meeting company standards despite extensive support and additional training opportunities. Patricia asked for time to review the documentation. Vanessa pushed for immediate action, claiming that keeping problematic employees was detrimental to team morale and client relationships. I remained calm throughout the meeting, answered questions directly, provided my own documentation showing successful project completions and positive client feedback. After the meeting, I went back to my office and made 3 phone calls. The first was to an employment attorney who specialized in workplace harassment cases. I'd researched firms during lunch breaks and identified someone with experience handling cases against major corporations. The second call was to the retreat center's security department. The archived footage had been processed and was ready for pickup. The third call was to Patricia in Human Resources. I requested a meeting for Friday afternoon to discuss my employment situation. I explained that I had additional information relevant to my performance evaluations that I'd like to present before any final decisions were made. She agreed to the meeting, though she sounded surprised that I was requesting the discussion rather than waiting for management's decision. Friday afternoon, I walked into the Human Resources conference room with a folder containing documentation from 3 years of harassment, audio and video evidence from multiple company retreats, and statements from former employees detailing identical patterns of abuse. Patricia was there, Vanessa was there, and, at my request, James Morrison from senior leadership was present as a witness. I placed the folder on the table but didn't open it immediately. Before we discuss my performance evaluation, I said, I think you should know that I've been documenting a pattern of sexual harassment and professional retaliation that extends back at least 3 years and affects multiple former employees. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but I saw her hand tighten around her pen. I have audio recordings of sexual propositions made by my supervisor during company-sponsored events. I have documented evidence of systematic retaliation against employees who rejected those advances. And I have statements from former employees corroborating identical patterns of abuse. I opened the folder and began laying out the evidence. The room went completely silent except for the sound of papers being placed on the conference table. The audio played clearly through the conference room speakers. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable. The proposition was unambiguous. The timeline of retaliation was documented in her own emails and performance evaluations. James Morrison stopped the recording after the first conversation. His face had gone pale. How many instances do you have documented? He asked. 4 separate retreats, 7 different employees, all following identical patterns. I placed the statements from former employees on the table, Trevor's account, the others who'd been forced out, each story matching the same sequence of events. Patricia was reviewing the documentation with increasing concern. She pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. Why didn't anyone report this before? She asked. They did, I said. Individual complaints about performance issues, hostile work environment, unrealistic deadlines. But nobody connected the pattern because the complaints were separated by time and the victims left the company. Vanessa spoke for the first time since the meeting began. This is ridiculous, she said. These are disgruntled former employees making false accusations. The retreat conversations were misinterpreted. Everything I've done has been within my authority as a supervisor. James Morrison was reviewing the audio transcripts, the timestamps, the correlation between retreat dates and subsequent performance problems. Vanessa, he said quietly, I think you should contact a lawyer. The meeting ended with Vanessa suspended pending investigation. Her access to company systems was terminated immediately. Security escorted her from the building while I was still in the conference room providing additional documentation to Human Resources. I cleaned out my desk that afternoon. Not because I was fired, but because I'd already accepted another position. The employment attorney had connected me with colleagues in the industry who were familiar with my work. The job offer came with a 20% salary increase and no history of harassment complaints. Patricia called me at home that evening. The investigation was moving quickly. The company's legal department was reviewing potential liability exposure. Criminal referrals were being considered. Vanessa's employment was terminated within 72 hours. 6 months later, I was settled into my new position at Brightwell Engineering. The work was challenging. The environment was professional, and my supervisor treated everyone with respect regardless of gender or personal relationships. Vanessa's termination had triggered a company-wide review of management practices at Ironspire. 3 other supervisors were investigated for similar behavior patterns. 2 were terminated. The 3rd was demoted and required to complete extensive training. Trevor called me last month. He'd been contacted by Ironspire's legal department and offered a settlement for the harassment he'd experienced. Nothing could undo the damage to his career, but the financial compensation allowed him to start his own consulting firm. The other former employees received similar settlements. The company wanted to resolve the liability quickly and quietly. I received a settlement offer as well, though I hadn't asked for one. The amount was significant enough to pay off my mortgage and establish a solid emergency fund. Sometimes justice comes with compound interest. The most satisfying part wasn't the money or the new job. It was knowing that Vanessa couldn't do this to anyone else. Her references now included accurate information about the circumstances of her termination. Her professional reputation in the industry was permanently damaged. I kept one piece of documentation from the entire experience, the audio recording of our conversation at the retreat. Not because I wanted to remember the harassment, but because it reminded me that sometimes the evidence you need is created by the person who's trying to harm you. Vanessa had approved the security system that documented her own misconduct. She'd created the paper trail that proved the retaliation. She'd given me everything I needed to stop her. I didn't have to destroy her career. She'd done that herself. I just made sure the right people found out about it.